If you've ever thought about hiking the Appalachian woods alone, you need to hear this first. Most people look at these mountains and see nothing but beauty. Rolling green ridges that fade into blue mist, old churches on the hillsides, tourists snapping photos of wildflowers, babbling creeks and autumn leaves. It all looks so harmless, peaceful even. The kind of place you'd bring your family for a quiet weekend, far from the chaos of the world. But that's the lie. That's the skin the mountains wear when strangers are watching. Locals, real locals, the ones who've lived here for generations, know better. They talk in whispers, usually after dark, and only if they trust you. They'll tell you about sounds that aren't animals, paths that change when you're not looking, and figures standing just far enough away that you'll doubt you saw them at all. They'll warn you not to whistle after midnight and never ever follow a voice calling your name. I shouldn't be saying this. Honestly, I don't even want to. People who share too much about these woods tend to go missing. But I've heard too many stories, seen too many patterns to keep my mouth shut any longer. What I'm about to share with you, these aren't campfire tales. These are true accounts. Stories that were never meant to reach outsiders. And once you've heard them, you'll never look at the Appalachians the same way again. The Appalachians aren't just trees and trails, they're a world of their own. Drive long enough through the back roads and you'll pass towns that look frozen in time. Shuttered coal mines, rusted equipment left to rot in the weeds, houses sagging under the weight of years. People leave, but the mountains aren't, they stay. They wait. Step into the woods and you'll feel it almost immediately. The ground is soft, like it's breathing beneath your boots. The trees creak in voices too human for comfort, swaying even when the air is perfectly still. Sometimes the silence gets so deep you can hear your heartbeat echoing in your ears, until it's broken by the sharp crack of something stepping just out of sight. And then, there are the lights. Locals don't chase them anymore. Strange orbs floating between trees, cold and pulsing, guiding you deeper off the trail. Some say it's swamp gas. Others claim it's miners' lamps from men who never came back up. But the old families here know better. They'll just mutter, "Don't follow what shines." Ask any local and they'll tell you the woods don't just hold animals. They hold watchers, and one man, someone who should have known better, found that out the hard way. The first account came from a man who knew these mountains better than most. A survivalist. Not some city hiker with a shiny new backpack. This was someone who'd spent decades out here. He thought nothing could shake him. He was wrong. He set up camp deep off the trail, in a spot where the trees were so thick the sky itself felt like it was closing in. He built a fire, cooked a meal, and stretched out under the stars. Everything felt routine until the woods started laughing. Not birds, not coyotes. Laughter. His laughter. At first he froze, convinced his mind was playing tricks. But then it came again. Low, drawn out, echoing between the trees. He swore it sounded exactly like him, mocking every chuckle he'd made earlier by the fire. He even called out, "Who's there?" But the reply came back in his own voice. "Who's there?" Hours passed. He forced himself to sleep, knife clutched in hand. But when he woke, everything was wrong. The fire was dead cold. His gear had been moved, neatly stacked as if someone had cataloged every item. And in the dirt, nothing, no footprints, no sign of trespass. That's when he noticed them. Figures, 4, maybe 5, standing perfectly still at the tree line. Too far for details, but close enough he could feel their eyes. He swore one of them grinned. And the grin, it was his. He bolted, left half his supplies behind, said he didn't stop running until sunrise broke through the trees, until he heard birds again, until the silence finally gave him back his own voice. He thought it was a prank, until he saw his own reflection, smiling back at him from the dark. That's how he told it, and here's the part that keeps me up at night. When he went back later with friends to recover his gear, they couldn't find the campsite at all. The clearing was gone, swallowed back into the forest, and believe it or not, that was the least disturbing story I've heard out there. The next account came from a man who wasn't looking for anything except a quiet evening hike. He wasn't a believer in ghost stories. He just wanted the peace of the mountains at dusk. But peace isn't what he found. He said it started when he spotted a girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, barefoot and pale, standing in the middle of the trail. She didn't look hurt, just misplaced. "Hey," he called, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you lost?" She nodded. Her voice was small, almost swallowed by the woods. "Can you help me find my house?" Now, what kind of person says no to that? He took her hand and let her lead. The sun was sliding down fast, shadows knotting between the trees. Every step seemed wrong, like the forest was folding in on itself. The trail curved back where it shouldn't. The trees bent, branches angling downward like crooked fingers. And the silence, it wasn't natural. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just the sound of his own boots and the girl's bare feet brushing the dirt. "Where's your house?" he asked again. She didn't answer. She just kept walking. Over and over she'd whisper, "Almost there. Almost home." Finally, when his nerves were fraying, she stopped, turned to face him. Her eyes were darker than they should have been in that fading light. And she smiled. "We're already home." Then she was gone. Just gone. No running off, no sound in the brush. One moment she was there, the next the woods swallowed her whole. He bolted back the way he thought they'd come, only to realize he'd lost the trail entirely. He spent the whole night stumbling through the dark, convinced every step would land him in a hole or worse. When he told the story later, he admitted what haunted him most wasn't her vanishing. It was the word "we." Who else had he brought into those woods? And here's the chilling part. His account matches dozens of missing persons cases out here. Children leading strangers deeper, never to return. Patterns, always patterns. And once you start noticing them, it's impossible to unsee. If you've been listening closely, you've probably noticed something. These stories rhyme. Different people, different decades, but the same threads running through them like veins under the skin. The survivalist hears his own laughter in the trees. The hiker follows a child that shouldn't exist. Two different encounters, yet both speak of something mimicking us, pulling us deeper, rearranging the rules of the woods until reality itself bends. That's how Appalachia works. It doesn't come at you like a bear or a storm. It studies you, it learns your face, your voice, your fears, and once it does, it doesn't stop. People talk about watchers in the trees, shadows that lean closer the longer you stay. The sense of being followed long after you've left the forest. Maybe that's the rule out here. Once they notice you, you don't stop being noticed, so I'll ask you, have you ever seen lights in the woods? Heard a voice that shouldn't be there? If so, maybe you've been noticed too. And if you think that's unsettling, wait until you hear what the miners found. This next one came from a man who'd spent most of his life underground. A former miner. He told me he went back years after the shaft shut down, bringing two old coworkers along. For them, it was supposed to be nostalgia, a chance to drink, swap stories, and laugh about the days when the mountain nearly killed them a dozen times over. They walked down into the darkness with flashlights, boots crunching on stone. At first, it was just as they remembered, the smell of coal dust, the endless dripping of water, graffiti scrawled on the walls by men long gone. One of them even joked, "Feels like home, don't it?" But then they heard it. A low sound, steady, rising and falling. Not wind, not water, breathing. They froze, shined their lights down the shaft. The walls themselves seemed to swell with each inhale, then shrink with each exhale. A rhythm, a heartbeat buried in stone. "Mountains alive," one of them whispered. Another tried to laugh it off. "You're just drunk." But his voice shook. Still, curiosity pulled them deeper. That's when it happened. Mid-sentence, one of the men just stopped. His flashlight clattered to the floor, beam shaking wildly. And his voice, those last words he spoke, didn't fade. They echoed, over and over, bouncing off the stone. Except the echo didn't stop. "Don't look back," it said, again and again. Long after he was gone, the two remaining men fled, stumbling blind through the tunnels, chased by their friend's voice echoing endlessly behind them. When they finally surfaced, gasping for air, the mountainside looked the same as it always had. Quiet, ancient, indifferent. But one thing had changed. They were only two. The man telling me this swore his friend never came out, and the company records marked him down as never employed, as if the mountain itself erased him. Some miners swear the mountain is alive and hungry. That's how he ended it. And me? I believe him. Because the way he said it, it wasn't a warning. It was a confession. And that's when I realized what waits beneath these mountains may be far worse than what waits in the trees. Some of you probably think these are just urban legends, campfire tales with Appalachian flavor. I used to think that too. But the problem is, they don't stay buried. The same stories surface again and again, told by different mouths, different generations, but always carrying the same bones. A mimic in the trees. A child leading strangers away. A mind that swallows its men whole. They don't change, not really. They just resurface like the mountain pushing old bones back up through the soil. And the strangest part? Official reports never match. A hiker's body is lost to exposure. A miner moved out of state. A missing child dismissed as a runaway. Yet survivors tell a different story. Always. Have you noticed how those explanations never line up with the scars people carry, or the way their eyes never quite focus when they talk? But the last story I'll tell you, that's the one that made me stop going into the woods entirely. I've shared other people's stories, but this one's mine. I wasn't looking for anything strange that day. I'd gotten turned around on an old game trail, dusk creeping in faster than I liked. I should have backtracked, but instead I pushed deeper, hoping to cut across to the main path. That's when I saw it, a cabin. At first glance, it looked brand new. Fresh timber, roof perfectly intact, not a single sign of rot, which should have been my first red flag. Nothing in those woods looks untouched by weather. But what froze me was the absence of windows. Not boarded up, not broken, just none. 4 walls, a door, and a silence pressing down so hard it felt like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Curiosity got the better of me. I went inside. The air was stale, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Furniture sat beneath sheets, shapes of chairs, and a table, but the cloth rippled as if something beneath it was exhaling. The walls made a sound too. Low, hollow whispers like air moving through lungs. Then the pressure started. Something unseen pressing against the walls from within. The timber bowing inward as though the cabin itself wanted out. That's when the cynical part of me thought, you know it's bad when you're grateful to be lost. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted out the door, tearing through the undergrowth, branches whipping my face. My lungs burned, and when I finally forced myself to look back, there was nothing. No cabin, just trees. Later, when I told an old local about it, he didn't laugh or call me crazy. He just said, "You only see the cabin if it wants you to." And I haven't gone back since, because whatever built those walls, it noticed me, and that's the part I can't shake. Now that you've heard these stories, you're not just an outsider anymore. The Appalachians know your name. That's how it works. You listen and something listens back. You might notice it tonight. A light flickering in your room for no reason. A rustle outside your window even though there's no wind. Or maybe a mirror catching something that isn't quite you, smiling just a second too long. Don't shrug it off. That's how they start. Quiet, subtle. They slip in the way mist curls through trees. Soft, almost beautiful, until you realize it's wrapped around your throat. So here's my warning. If the woods ever call your name at night, don't answer. They already know you're listening. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been to the Appalachians? Have you heard laughter in the woods or seen lights no one could explain? Drop your stories below, because there are more tales I could tell. But some are too dangerous to speak aloud, at least here. And if you think you're safe just because you're not in the mountains, think again. They have a way of finding you.